Understood here is the full script rewritten and entirely in English. 1,200 to 1,500 words, no headings, no labels, no extra commentary. Single block narration, with natural breaks using and fast-paced cinematic emotional, and following your required structure exactly. Swallowed by darkness, trapped inside a living giant, and somehow still breathing. A moment so unreal that even he wondered if he was already dead. Michael Packard, 56 years old, an American lobster diver from Cape Cod. A man who spent his entire life in the ocean. Wave storms close calls, he had seen them all, and he believed he understood the sea better than most people on Earth. But that morning proved him wrong. The sky was clear, the water was calm, the kind of peaceful day divers pray for. Michael suited up, checked his oxygen, and dropped into the cold Atlantic. The ocean wrapped around him like it always did. Familiar, predictable, a place he trusted. He descended toward the seabed, scanning the sandy patches where lobsters usually hide. Everything felt routine, nothing unusual, no warning. But the ocean doesn't always roar before it attacks. Sometimes it moves silently, and sometimes it opens its mouth. 1 second Michael was reaching toward a rock. The next a violent force slammed into him hard, like being hit by a truck underwater. Pain exploded across his body. He spun in total confusion. No light, no water movement, no sound except a deep, crushing pressure. And then he realized something terrifying. He wasn't floating. He was inside something. Squeezed, enclosed, surrounded by moving flesh. His brain tried to make sense of it. A shark, a seal, a collapsing cave, but the space was too big, too soft, too warm. And then it hit him. Impossible, insane, but unmistakably real. He was in the mouth of a whale. His chest tightened. A cold shock ran through his spine. Whales don't attack humans. Everyone knows that. But this wasn't an attack. It was an accident. A humpback whale feeding with its mouth wide open had swallowed him by mistake. There in the blackness he could feel the creature's throat muscles shifting, trying to understand the strange object it just engulfed. He could feel the whale rising, fast, and the pressure around him tightened. If the whale chose to swallow, its throat only 10 inches wide would crush him instantly. If it spat him out too fast, he could be thrown against the surface and knocked unconscious. If it dove, the pressure could collapse his lungs. Death wasn't an idea anymore, it was a countdown. Michael kicked wildly. He pushed against the moving walls. He could feel smooth muscles slick with seawater. He could feel the whale's power with every shift, like struggling inside a bus-sized engine. He tried to scream, but the sound died in the fleshy chamber. His regulator was still in his mouth, thank God, but how long would his air last, and did it even matter? Inside that darkness, a thought cut through the panic: his 2 sons. His wife. He saw their faces like flashes of light in the void, and he refused to let this be the last chapter of his life. He twisted his body trying to orient himself, hard to tell up from down, hard to tell anything. Everything was moving. Everything was alive. The whale shook its head, jerking, rolling. The pressure shifted violently, tossing him around like a rag doll. Scientists say whales sometimes expel objects they don't recognize by shaking their jaws. That meant the whale was trying to get rid of him. But it also meant bones could snap, joints could tear, organs could rupture. Every second stretched into a lifetime. Michael felt his oxygen tank slam into flesh. He pushed it outward, hoping the rigid metal would bother the whale enough to force a reaction. He punched, he kicked, not out of anger, but desperation. His thoughts raced. Stay calm, find a way, don't freeze, don't give up. A wave of hopelessness hit him. How do you escape an animal the size of a house? How do you fight something with no malice, no intention, just raw instinct and mass? The darkness pushed deeper into his mind. A suffocating, endless black. Then movement. A rapid ascent. The pressure in his ears dropped. The water temperature changed. The whale was heading toward the surface. His body pressed against the roof of the whale's mouth, forced upward by a force he couldn't fight. Light, dim and fractured, began to seep through the gaps in its jaws. Michael felt a shift, a tightening, a final shake, and then with a violent burst, Everything exploded outward. He was airborne, launched, thrown out of the whale's mouth like a broken piece of debris. He hit the surface hard, the shock of cold air slamming into his lungs. He tore out his regulator and gasped raw, desperate breaths. The sky had never looked so bright. Behind him, the whale's massive back arched, then disappeared into the depths with a final flick of its tail. No anger, no chase, just a silent retreat. Michael floated in shock, limbs trembling, mind struggling to accept he was alive. The boat crew saw the eruption of water and rushed toward him. They hauled him aboard, shouting his name, shaking with disbelief. His body was bruised, his legs numb, but he was conscious, breathing, speaking, a man who had been inside the mouth of a humpback whale and somehow escaped. Paramedics checked him. No broken bones, no internal bleeding, just battered muscles and a stunned mind trying to process the impossible. On the ride back to shore, Michael kept touching his face, his chest, as if confirming he wasn't a hallucination. He whispered that he thought of his kids the entire time, that he made peace with dying in the dark, that he still didn't understand how he survived. But he did. And the world would later hear the story, some doubting, some amazed. But the truth didn't need convincing. The Almus Mevingian, she also. Das oceans witnessed as Survival isn't always about strength. Sometimes it's about refusing to let your last thought be fear. Sometimes it's about one more breath, one more push, one more second. Michael walked away with a message carved into his soul. The ocean gives life, but it also reminds us how fragile we are, how quickly everything can disappear. And now the question is yours. If you were swallowed by darkness with no control, what would you fight for to stay alive?